When you start that fire and you start to watch the oven heat up and whatever, that's the favourite part of my day. You literally do go back in time every day. You know, every time you light the oven, and there's just a majesty to it you just never ever get tired of.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. We've had a few discussions on Deep in the Weeds about tradition, authenticity, about evolution, and dare I say, fusion. Amongst the differing opinions, pizza seems to rear its head in many of the conversations. What is important when making pizza? To maintain traditions, or creating the best experience, or trying something new? Lee Carroll is the chef and owner of Queenies Margherita in Cronulla in Sydney. Lee, how are you?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to get you on the show. You're doing some amazing things there in the Shire. Tell us a little bit about Queenies Margherita.
Yeah, funny, just in your intro there, you posed the question, what is pizza? I mean, it's so diverse. And I think it's very important for us, specifically at Queenies Margherita. Our intention was to open as close we want to give you as close a Neapolitan pizza experience as you'll get in Naples. So I have no problem with diversifying. I have no problem with modern ingredients. As you may know, or you may not know, we're a member of what's called the AVPN. It's short for, in Italian, the Associazione Verace Pizza Napolitana. It's the Association of the True Pizza of Naples. It's existed since 1984. And its mandate is purely to protect the integrity of true Neapolitan pizza around the world. It promotes the equipment, the techniques, the recipes, the methods, everything to do with Neapolitan pizza. And I trained with those guys in 2013. And so, I'll say time and time again, the point of Queenies Margherita is to give us as close a facsimile to Neapolitan pizza as you'll find in Naples. So that's what we try and do. Other people are doing more modern things and whatever, and everything's legitimate. If you think about the AVPN and what they're basically stating is, as long as it's culinarily correct, then there's no problem with it going on a pizza. Obviously, that's the birthplace of pizza, and they're very traditional in their approach. So, yeah, but that's sort of the guidelines of Queenies Margherita, if you will.
Tell us a bit about your journey to sort of make the grade for AVPN.
Yeah, well, I was a chef for 20 years prior to going to Naples. I didn't go there until I was 40. But I had been eating Neapolitan pizza at probably the original one was Pizza Mario in Darlinghurst, that went on to become Da Mario. And David Cowdrell, who was the founder of Pizza Mario and Da Mario, he and I became very good friends. And so he really helped me on my journey to the AVPN. And he was the first one in Australia to gain the accreditation from the AVPN. So there's still less than 1,000 members worldwide of that association. And he was number 153 in Australia. We're number 539. So it just goes to show you what an early adopter he was. And he and I became very close friends over the 10 years I was eating at his pizzeria prior to going to Naples. He helped me. But I think in my career, I did my apprenticeship in Cronulla. I'm still in Cronulla, and the guys I work for are great, still very good friends to this day. But there's a healthy amount of imposter syndrome, I think, when you haven't sort of done those hard yards in the city as a chef and what have you. I was always searching for something that was a little bit more challenging. I wanted to be very, very good at something. And although I was a good all-rounder and did teach myself a lot throughout the course of my career, I do feel like, I did feel like, and I still do feel like, you really need to dig deep into something to become, comfortably very good at it. And so that's exactly what I did. I went over there and I worked in Naples and I did the hard yards, and so now we've got something that is very authentic and that I'm very proud of.
Well, I want to explore that journey that you did go on, but first take us back to when you were young. Where did you grow up and what sort of role did food play for you?
So my parents were sort of separated, and I spent half a week with my mum and half a week with my dad, and my dad was in Cogra Bay and my mum was in Heathcote. So I went to school at Cogra Maris Brothers throughout high school, and my dad actually had a two-hat restaurant in Cogra Bay called Christie's Restaurant, a French affair, very serious restaurant. I remember back in the day, you'll know Huck. Back in the day, Leo Schofield was a food writer, and he did a live broadcast from the dining room on a current affair. I mean, you can imagine. You're talking like 1986 or something. That was like huge, you know. So yeah, it was a really serious restaurant, and my stepmom ran the floor there. My mum was a corporate caterer in the North Sydney. She used to run a corporate boardroom on Berry Street in North Sydney, and I used to go in there from time to time on school holidays or whatever. So I was really entrenched in the food industry. You know, I grew up sleeping on dining room chairs. So, you know.
Do you have any stories of those days working either, hanging out either with your mum or dad at work?
Oh, for sure. Oh man, like the stories are endless. But when you grow up in a dining room like that, you become very accustomed to that space. And I'll still say to this day, that's kind of like that's my domain. Sitting in a restaurant dining room is, I just feel at home in a restaurant dining room. And, so every Tuesday I was allowed to take a friend from high school along, and I had a broad circle of friends. So each week I might take a different friend along. One of them had never been exposed to that kind of food or a restaurant like that. We're talking about early 80s to late 80s. These were Chinese restaurant days, So we were going there eating, this fine French fare, quail and pheasant and pate, and these guys were like, what the hell is this, So,
you must have been popular.
Yeah. So, but they were great days, and I remember them fondly. And of course, from there, I ended up washing dishes in my dad's restaurant. He took on a couple of catering projects in clubs and whatever as time went by. And so from 13 years old, I was washing dishes in kitchens and, doing big functions, pumping plates through, finishing at, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning after scrubbing down floors and whatever. So I've had a real, this has been my life, So from the back door to the front door, there's nothing I don't know about my own industry. I've kind of done it all along the way,
Is there any advice or anything that you learnt from your dad that you take on board now as a restaurateur?
His work ethic is unbelievable. I mean, he is just, a very consistent guy. And I think that consistency when you're doing food at that level, that consistency, to just, and also just to keep striving. I remember we used to go out to restaurants and he'd be so inquisitive, he'd ask the wait staff, hey, there's something sweet in that sauce or whatever. And I can't quite work out what it is. And even if the wait staff back then, had to go and ask the chef or whatever, and they'd come back, there's a bit of caramelized carrot in there. It's like, caramelized carrot, like who would have thought, And so there was that, but the work ethic really, mate, was the thing he's just a consistent guy. He just, that was really what sort of served him very well over those years.
You mentioned that you spent 20 years as a chef before your exploration into the world of pizza. Tell us a little bit about that period of time. What were the really sort of important people and venues that you worked with over that 20 years?
Yeah, well, I did my apprenticeship in Cronulla, started there in 1990. The restaurant now no longer exists, but the owners of that restaurant, they moved down the road to quite a prominent restaurant in Cronulla called Sea Level. It's a big waterfront venue, it's those guys are hospo professionals. They know what they're doing in their realm, and they do it very, very well. So I spent 4 years with those guys. After I'd finished my apprenticeship, end of '94, I took on. They had just taken over the catering at the Royal Motor Yacht Club in Woolooware. And so I went and ran that kitchen for a few months before heading to the snow. So I did the snow season in 1995. I ran the Man from Snowy River Hotel for a season in 95 where, I know, right? That's a brilliant place. But there I met my wife. And so she was from Queensland, but she ended up after the season coming home to Sydney with me. And that November we announced that we were pregnant with our daughter. So I was 21, I was 21 and so we sort of, and we look, we've got a great family. We're so blessed. But honestly, that was a bit of a curveball for a 21-year-old who sort of really now didn't have, what am I going to do here? I always knew I wanted to open my own restaurant, but with no money and a kid on the way, dreams of going into the city at that point were sort of, put on hold and what have you. So I just jumped into kitchens. I just get. And there was a period of time where I actually left the industry while my kids were young to watch them grow up and to be there for them, because the industry can be a bit tough like that. I got a very, very close relationship with my kids. And so, I did. I stepped out for about 7 years during their sort of, maybe 8 to 15 sort of age. And then I jumped back in and I ended up, I bought my first, so we've had a few restaurants in our time. We've had a couple of restaurants across the Sutherland Shire. We opened our first one in Guyamere in 2006, and then I took on a business partner. We opened another one in Menai and another one in Cronulla. They were all sort of suburban Italian restaurants, your spaghetti bolognese and frozen tortellini boschiolo type deals. And I think that's what happened. I was sort of looking for that. I wanted my own business, but I think that doing that type of food, it wasn't really professionally satisfying. So I was still looking for something that. And so, I sold out of all of that, and that's when I went to Naples in 2013 and decided, I really want to do something serious here. So, yeah.
Tell us about that trip. What was it like for you? Do you have any stories of immersing yourself into Naples?
Man, I hadn't been. I mean, I'd been to Bali and I'd been to Fiji. I mean, and when I went to Bali, I was 11. I went to Fiji in 2010 with my family, and so we went to. That was the first time I'd been overseas. I mean, I'd never been to Europe. So we started in London, visited a friend there. It was like, my God, this is just crazy. In fact, it's funny, like landing in London, I went out and I had a look around, and this type of businesses, it could have been Sydney. And I think it's one of those things that the world becomes very small when you start to travel. You realise that people are not dissimilar no matter where you go. And when you're in the restaurant game, and especially when you're like me and you've only sort of spent time in the suburbs, that was really... it was a big confidence booster, because I felt like people are people, as long as you're giving them good service, good food, blah, 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 you're sort of in the game. And so that's the way it was back then. If you had that, if you had that drive to do your own thing and you really just wanted to put smiles on people's face, then you were good to go no matter where you were. That was really... that really was a turning point for me. And then we jumped around and we went to Naples and we spent our 16th wedding anniversary in Naples, and then we went and trained. So the AVPN school back then is in a place called Poggirale. Poggirale is like the prison is directly across the road. It's like, man, it's like a slum. I mean, not to put shit on the place. The people of Naples are the most beautiful people. They really are generous, beautiful people, and that's what I thank the people of Naples. They've given me this knowledge and they give it freely. They'll share it with you. They'll tell you anything. They'll take you into their kitchens or their homes. They'll teach you how to cook stuff. They're just beautiful people,
How long did it take you to master it and get your head around sort of what is needed to...
Well, when you say master it, mate, it's one of those things like no one in their right mind is going to say they're a master of pizza, It's the surefire way to get yourself crucified by a Neapolitan is to say you're a master. But they do say this. They do say that it takes 8 years to become a maestro. Okay, so we equate it to something like learning a musical instrument. If you want to be really good at it, it's your 10,000 hours. It's muscle memory, which is only gained by repetition. And there's a lot of different stuff going on. So, when we're manipulating dough on the bench, for example, no trays are allowed, no mechanical intervention, whatever. It's all done by hand. You're opening the dough onto typically a marble or a granite bench. The amount of flour you use on the bottom is particularly important because, as anyone who's cooked a Mornay sauce will know, if you don't cook flour out, it gives you that rough, gummy mouthfeel. And that's exactly what happens with excess flour on the base of a Neapolitan pizza. We cook at 500 degrees Celsius for 60 seconds. If you've got excess flour on the bottom of that pizza, ironically, it's going to burn and still be raw somehow. It goes yellow, it goes black, it's bitter, it's got a terrible mouthfeel. And so we do everything we can to and it's very difficult, especially in humid. Like this summer has been humid. When you're working with pizza on the bench like that, we can't open 8 pieces at a time on the bench. We work with 2 or 3 pizzas on the bench at a time. And we do that to maintain a standard. And so, knowing how to control a wood-burning oven using different species of wood. In Naples, it's all beechwood, and you get it delivered. It's like it's almost like 2x4, and it's all cut like that. And you get a bag of sawdust, which you can use to, flame to encourage the fire if you need a little bit of extra oomph. It's not like that here. We're using aged wood here from northern New South Wales or western New South Wales at the moment. it's coming from places. You're using oak and redwoods and yellow box, and you're using all these different species, and you have to sort of know what each of those does. One's got more oil, so it'll flare more. This one's going to give you more intense heat over the course of, 3-4 hours. So you sort of have to just be aware of all these things. So it can be a bit tricky. But as far as being a master is concerned, look, we've been there 10 years now. I've trained my daughter now, so she's in the kitchen with me, which is just bloody brilliant. But yeah, look, if I went to Naples, back to Naples now into a kitchen, I can tell you that they'll show me 50 things I never even knew existed. So I'm very good at what we do at our menu, but yeah.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Tell us about the period of time when you came home and decided that this was the way forward for you. What did you do? How did you sort of immerse yourself into pizza after returning from Naples?
Yeah, so on my birthday, so my birthday's on the 1st of March, so we'd come back from Naples, and my wife actually bought me a wood-burning tunnel oven, one of these little backyard things that existed 10 years ago. Yeah, now it's all sort of uni and whatever, they're all the rage. I've got a few of those, and they're good. But I had a wood-burning oven, and so I'd throw pizza parties, and I'd just tell people, like, hey, we're doing it tonight. It might be a random Wednesday night. But I'd make about 30 panetti, 30 dough, and I'd just cook. I say, look, come eat with us, get a takeaway, whatever. I just want to practice. And so I just practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And eventually an opportunity came along. It's a bit of a long story, but I'll shorten this bit for you. But after, so the place I did my apprenticeship, it eventually sold. And as I say, the guys moved down to an open sea level. At the Beachside Brasserie, where I did my apprenticeship in the beginning, they had a business partner. When that sort of split up and the guys went and did sea level, the business partner went across the road and opened a little restaurant called the Blue Parrot on Surf Road in Cronulla. And it was there for years. It was there forever. I worked there for 4 years after I'd finished my apprenticeship and come back from the snow. And so I ended up buying that restaurant off my former boss, and I turned it into Queen Margherita. So that's kind of the story there. And so then we had our proper oven, like our oven's fully imported from Naples, our dough mixers from Naples. Like, we are really doing, if a Neapolitan pizza person walks into my kitchen, it's like they're in Naples. It's the fior di latte, the San Marzano tomatoes. We do everything that we can to give you a Neapolitan pizza experience.
You mentioned it's been about a decade now, but tell us about, what was it like the first couple of years with the restaurant? Was it an easy sell, the Neapolitan pizza?
The advantage I had, I guess, was that I had a bit of a profile in the area. By this stage, my dad owned a restaurant in Cronulla called Three Fish, and being in the area a long time, knowing a lot of people, being a former surfer, etc. So I had a lot of advocates, my former employers. Everyone had known what I had done and the journey that I'd been on and how serious I was about it. So to be fair, like, it would have been far more difficult to go to a new area where no one knew who I was and back then, Neapolitan pizza wasn't what it is. It's become so ubiquitous now. Every pub's basically got Neapolitan style. And, but that wasn't the case, even 5 years ago in pubs. It was burgeoning, but 10 years ago, there were maybe, half a dozen restaurants in Sydney that were doing proper Neapolitan style. And so, yeah, we got a lot of pushback from people who didn't really understand, and it's soggy and it's, it's this and that and blah, blah, blah. And every time we got a bad review saying, oh, it's wet and it's soggy, I felt like going on there saying, thanks very much. That's exactly how it should be. I almost didn't see it as criticism. It was like, I don't know, man, like, what more can I do? We've got a big sign at the front that says Neapolitan Pizzeria. We've got, we had one person walk out because we didn't have cheeseburgers on the menu. I mean, what do you want from me? So it was a bit ridiculous. But the people who did support us, like, they were vehement advocates. They would go and tell the people, oh, you know what you're talking about. This is exactly what Neapolitan. So for us, it was just a matter of staying true to the tradition. I mean, during COVID, I remember saying to my guys, like, we don't do ham and pineapple, and there's a reason for that. That's not to say there's an argument for it, which if you want to get into that conversation, we can. But during COVID, I said to my guys, listen, we're not going to panic here and start selling things that are not true Neapolitan. So if it's got Naples through 300 years of history, then I think we can get through this. It's gone through starvation, world wars, famine, disease. But it's gone through everything, and it's still there. That tells you that it's got legs. I mean, you don't change Peking duck in COVID because of, what I mean? Like, no, we're not doing that. So I'm very, very, I just don't care. I'll sooner go broke. I don't care. I'm not about to bastardize the product for the sake of the. I think the people will get my passion. They'll understand it. And they do.
You mentioned the mandate of the AVPN of being culinary correct. You just brought up ham and pineapple pizza, very popular in Australia. Tell us a little bit about that. Is that an area that you've gone into, or tell us a bit about that?
So my floor manager, Fabio, who's been with me 10 years, he's a bloody legend. He's one of my best mates. He's Neapolitan. And, over a drink over the bar one night, we got talking about it. This was years ago. And he had the opinion that it's not necessarily that it's done. It's not necessarily the fact that it's done. It's the way it's done. And then I said, it's funny you should say that, because if you think about, pairing black figs with prosciutto, what really is the difference apart from the depth of flavour you get in a fig that you don't necessarily, it is a different thing. But there are examples all over the world of sweet and savoury being complementary, sweet, savoury, salty being complementary. So I think my biggest issue is not necessarily, it's that tin shit that you get and you tip it out and it's in that sugary juice, and you just drain that off and you put it in your cold well, and there you go, you're ready to go. And then you pair it with some cheap shit pizza sauce that comes out of a can, and then you pair it with, cheap shit cheese, and then you pair it with cheap shit ham. I mean, it's a mass-produced product that I think the reason why Italians, Neapolitans in particular, hate it so much is not because it is a ham and pineapple pizza. I don't think that's the problem. First of all, pineapples don't grow in Italy. So if you go back in history, you go, okay, they just don't know what to do. Like, they don't use it, So, but as you said, the mandate of the AVPN essentially is to say that if we go back in time, let's go back 300 years, there was no refrigeration. There was no transportation, easy transportation. So you used what was in your area, and that became, that was a thing. So you take something from the sea, you take something from the land, and it was usually seasonal or preserved or cured so that you could use it all year round. So, if you take something like ham and pineapple and you say, okay, in Australia, we have ham, we have pigs, and we have pineapple. Okay, so, and we have the modern, I don't grow pineapples here in New South Wales, but in my backyard, but they're readily available. My mate's the biggest pineapple importer into Sydney fruit markets. So I've got pineapples. I've got as many pineapples as I could ever eat. But if I go and I take that and I use it with care, I roast the pineapple in the coals of the wood-burning oven the following morning after the oven dies down a bit. I tenderise the pineapple, I sweeten it up a little bit, I put a bit of smokiness in it, and then I go to pair it with something like porchetta, as opposed to using ham. Let's say I do a proper porchetta, right? I take it and I dry it out in the cool room, I season it up, I truss it, I roast it, I get the skin crispy, I do all the right things, right? Then I go and make a pizza with that pineapple, that porchetta. I don't use tomato sauce because it's unnecessary. We've already got acidity in the pineapple. We've got everything else we need from the porchetta. And now we've got the crackling to use as a bit of a over the top of the last minute kind of deal. So you get a bit of texture. That's the sort of thing, I don't even think a Neapolitan person would argue with that. I think that shows a level of care and understanding of the history that even they could say, yeah, look, I really can't argue with that. It's just a thing of this mass-produced rubbish food claiming to be pizza. It's like, no, that's not pizza. And I think that's where the argument really lies. Most people go, it's delicious. What's your problem? No worries. Come along to Queen Margherita. Let me make you one of these things. And we've never made it before. This is all theory, mate. But it's been in theory for 3 years. I should just shut up and do it. So I think we will, actually. But I don't think anyone who comes along who's even the harshest critic is going to come along and go, well, okay, look, even if you say it's not to my taste, you probably can't knock the fact that, okay, I can taste the porchetta, I can taste the pineapple, it's done correctly. I think there's a real argument for that in that sense.
You mentioned a couple of times about, working and carving out your career in the suburbs and feeling a little bit of an imposter syndrome. And yet Queen Margherita has made it in the top 50 lists of Oceania for the Asia Pacific. You've been in the Good Food Guides. It's won awards. Tell us a bit about the success and what impact it's had on you.
Well, these things have happened sort of in the last few years, almost post-COVID, really. I mean, when we first opened Queen Margherita, we were reviewed within 3 months, and when I say reviewed, it was a short black article or something, it wasn't a review as such, but man, like we'd never had a restaurant that was even worthy of someone, that for us was sort of immediately sort of put in my head that, geez, okay, maybe we are sort of onto something, and I didn't you don't open a restaurant to chase that sort of stuff. Well, certainly not a small suburban restaurant like ours, like if you focus on that, you're pretty much dead in the water to start with. But all we wanted to do was just do our job really well. And that's the funniest thing. It's sort of when I wasn't focused on that stuff, that's kind of when it happened. And, like to be included, like the Asia Pacific thing's going on right now. The awards are actually today. I couldn't be there. Unfortunately, we've got to, well, by the time this episode comes out, because it's on at 3:00 this afternoon in Tokyo time. So it's probably not, I don't know what the time is in Tokyo right now. But anyway, long story short, I'm allowed to let the cat out of the bag because by the time this episode comes out, it will have been announced. But, like that sort of stuff was like, and they review properly. They send somebody, they never announce themselves. They do the same thing that Good Food or Michelin would do. They just come in incognito and pay their bill and blah, blah, blah. So to be in there like 3 times now, like they've obviously, they keep coming back and they keep seeing something worthy. And that's what we're most proud of. My wife went through bloody cancer, breast cancer, just before COVID. She was diagnosed in August. And COVID came along in friggin' March. And that was the biggest. My wife is a friggin' genius on the floor, man. She's a perfectionist. She's the friendliest person alive, she was a huge loss to the business. And in the wake of, even when COVID passed, she felt like the stress that the hospitality put her under was perhaps in part responsible for her diagnosis. And so you can imagine what her relationship is with hospitality now. And she's just about to return to work, this week. And we're going to do that very cautiously. We're shortening her shifts and, we're going to make sure that she's supported and all that sort of stuff while she's going through it. So it's a really tenuous time. The business is just not the same unless Sarah and I are there. It's a small business. When people walk in, they know who we are. And if we're not there, my daughter and Fabio, by the way, are amazing. And people have now, they've formed a real relationship with those guys. So even if we're not there, we're very fortunate in the sense that, like, I'll walk down the street in Cronulla and someone calls across from Cronulla Mall, "Hey, Fabio." And I go, "Who's that guy?" He goes, "Lee, that guy's been a regular customer for 3 years." I go, "I've never seen his face my whole life. I don't know. I'm stuck in the back kitchen, whatever, like, because we have 2 kitchens." And so Fabio knows most of Cronulla. I don't know anybody. It's kind of the way I like it, actually. I'm a bit of a, quiet guy.
It's a really big family business. You mentioned your daughter as well, and she's making the pizzas now as well. How are her skills? Do you think she makes a better pizza than you?
Yeah, well, she's my daughter, so of course I'm going to say yes. She outshines me in every way. But I'll talk to you about that when we're off air, mate. No way. No bloody way. It's funny, like when you watch a pizza, I can tell you now, I can look on Instagram with people I follow on Instagram without the name or anything. I can tell you exactly whose pizza that is. Pizza has a signature like maybe, the way someone serves food, you might know, oh, that's definitely a Gordon Ramsay dish or whatever it may be, right? Pizza leaves a signature. And someone's dough, it's very specific to them. And while they all fall within the category of Neapolitan pizza, the crust has to be this wide and the crust has to be this high and the diameter of the pizza's got to be this and blah, blah, blah. That's all true, but within there, there's a million variations that can make someone, this guy uses more cheese, less cheese, blah, 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 blah. So my daughter and I, while even if we were side by side using the same dough, you would get 2 very slightly different pizzas come out of the oven. And that's what I love about pizza. It's on the day, that's the way it came out. It's kind of like a work of art or a tattoo. That's just what happened on the day. You can't take it back. It's done. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
you've been a part of the Cronulla hospitality scene from a child to sort of now. How much has it changed? And tell us a bit about it now and where it's at.
Man, like you watch a place like Cronulla evolve over the years. It's incredible. Like it has gone from a sleepy town. You got to remember, like Cronulla was a place where people used to go on holidays back in the 50s. I'm talking from San Souci. Like you would go and spend 2 weeks in Cronulla. And so. That's when we first went there. When I first started my apprenticeship in 1990, that restaurant I worked at was the biggest restaurant by far that had gone into Cronulla. And I think back then there was probably something like 30 or 40 eateries. And I'm talking cafes, pie shop, whatever it is. By the time I'd finished my apprenticeship and opened the first restaurant, so 2006, I think there was something like 104. I do encounter them today with all the development goes on, because when they build one of these apartment blocks, the LEP in Sutherland Shire Council states that the ground floor must be commercial. So now you've got these large spaces of commercial. Now, what's going to go in there? How many real estate agents are going to take up 140 square metres? And that's a small shop for a restaurant. That's the size of my shop. You know, Hurricanes has opened up in Cronulla around the corner. Man, they've got a 300-seat restaurant. Like, what's the floor space? 600? That's crazy. Like, what else is going to go in there? 600, unless you divide it into 10 different lots. You know, of course the restaurant's going to go in there. So, yeah, it's huge now. It's huge.
Well, you've created an amazing business there. What do you love about what you do?
Look, I will say that when you light that fire and that initial thing, I mean, I can sit down and have a beer and light that fire in the afternoon. It's like it never goes away. It's like a backyard barbecue or something. There's just something, and the kitchen's quiet and we're not open yet, and you got that time to yourself, and it's like that initial fire. You never get sick of that really ancient. You know, there's something in our DNA that just loves fire. And when you start that fire and you start to watch the oven heat up and whatever, that's the favourite part of my day. It's just so satisfying to watch the oven start to clear and the soot start to clear. And it takes hours. I mean, our oven, it's handmade in Naples by a company that was opened 100 years ago by the grandfather. Then the son took so the grandfather started, his son took over, now his son's taken over. All the materials in our oven are harvested off Mount Vesuvius. Every brick is made by hand. You know, we're talking about 3 different materials under the floor of the oven, a soil, a sand, and a pumice stone that all have heat retention qualities that all lend to the way the oven cooks. It's a double dome oven, so essentially you've got one oven inside another oven, and the flue is on the outside of the oven. So the heat has nowhere to go until it rolls outside the oven door and up into the flue. I mean, it's the most extraordinary piece of ancient kit. You know, it's like working with, you know, an old ink press or something. You know, like you literally do go back in time every day. You know, every time you light the oven, and there's just a majesty to it. You just never ever get tired of.
You mentioned about finding a specialty to really sort of hone your craft and do well in this career. How much has this sort of immersion into pizza changed you?
I'll say that, like, so when you know how to do something really well, there's a passion that exists simply because you know how to do it well. But beyond that, it's customers. It's watching people come into the restaurant and get what we're doing and go, man, like, and they'll come to me and they'll say things, and I don't mean this is an ego boost at all, because I don't buy into that shit. But when people come to you and say, man, I've tried pizza all over the world, like we took our kids to Italy and said, I want to go back to Queenies Margherita. You hear shit like that and it just resonates. You go, man, like, we're actually doing something that's impacting other people's lives. It's why we do hospitality, right? If you don't like people, don't do this gig. Like, we want to. How many times I said to my guys, man, we're not selling pizzas, we're selling smiles. And I know that's a fucking stupid cliche, but that's a fact of the matter. We are in the smiles business. You know, we exist to make people happy. That's what hospitality is. They've got to walk out happier than when they walked in. It's a pretty simple mandate. You know, we do it through food and booze, but our attitude is that that's our objective. Our objective is to make people happy. And when you've got everything that you need, you've got the equipment, you've got the know-how, you've got the ingredients, you've got the staff, you've got the venue, you know, the rest is just on you. So there's nowhere to hide when you start doing this. You know, you really are, you put yourself out on a limb. You're saying, hey, this is the best I can do. And if it's not good enough, well, then go back and try harder, you know. What can I tell you? It's a tough game. It's a tough game.
Well, Lee, what an absolute joy to catch up with you. I'm sure you got many more stories, so we'll have to catch up again soon. So please keep in touch and we'll do that.
Thanks very much, mate. Thanks for having me on the show.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.